Now, this evening is about neighborhood, but why neighborhood matters. Now, in a moment, I will try my best, to answer the why, the what, and the how questions that you may have in mind. Now, first of all, the why question. Why do we need to have it? Now, first is on needs. Now, as you are aware, the current Beam Plus suite, has only 3 building level 2, respectively the NB, dealing with the planning and design of the new buildings, the EB, for operation, maintenance, and upgrading of existing building, and also the BI, the building interior, specifically, for fitting out works, for non-domestic building. But if we look at the entire development process, something is definitely missing right at the beginning, isn't it? Because we simply don't have anything, for the public realm. We don't have anything for the space between building, and also we don't have anything, for the master plan stage, in the process. All right. So ND, or neighborhood, is simply designed to fill that gap. Now, secondly, it's going to be a more embracing tool. What does it mean? Because for a long time, we only had building level tools, for use by building professionals like architects, engineers, landscape architects, and also the environmental consultants, right? And other professions like planners, urban designers, sociologists, ecologists, conservation experts, they have been kept, at arm's length. Now, this tool is more embracing in the sense that, now this is a tool that those other professions you can be proud of and feel more, belonging to the larger, Beam Plus family. Now, why thinking of sustainability at the master plan stage is important? Now, the fact is that everyone is doing it right now around the globe, all right? So the assessment trend, is to move away from the building level, to smaller urban scale. Now, if you look at this survey, done only 2 years ago, by a research team, based in the West Coast, U.S., and at that time, there were about 552 sustainability tools, being used around the world, right? But of course, the majority of them are building level tools. But having said that, even 2 years ago, there were about more than 50 tools, so-called the USRT, urban sustainability tool, for use, by about 22 countries. Now, these tools, cover the categories like, the neighborhoods, landscape and park, transportation infrastructure, and special purposes. So that means the Beam Plus neighborhood is also designed, to align Hong Kong with the rest of the world. But what does neighborhood mean to us? It perhaps means different things to different people, right? Different animals, to different individuals. So some of you, I think, might be familiar, particularly those, in the planning profession, with these classic neighborhood models originate from North America. Now, the one on the top left, Karen Perry's neighborhood unit in 1929, it covers an areas with 400-meter walking distance, radiating from a community center right in the middle. The center is packed, with facilities like shops, schools, clinics, churches, etc. The one on the right, the very well-known, Rackburn experiment by Karen Stein, Henry Wright, around the same period, considered offshoot of the Garden City movement. Now, 2 weeks ago in another seminar, someone in the audience asked me about the relevance, of the Garden City movement, the Garden City, proposed, by Ebenezer Howard to Hong Kong. I hope, towards the end of my presentation, you can make assessment yourself, whether it is relevant or not relevant, or, a bit relevant. Now, at the bottom, I got 2 pictures here. This represents the walkable suburb model advocated by proponents like Michael Southworth, Peter Crawford, Some of you may have heard about them because they're more well-known and larger in another umbrella term called the New Urbanism in the 1990s. For example, the Canyons in Maryland, and the Copley Square in Boston. Some of the example cited by these proponents. But for us, this is probably the typical neighborhood model of Hong Kong in the 21st century. A housing estate in Newtown, usually over 1,000 units each, integrated variety of amenities to serve the community is designed for. So having gone through the history a little bit, so what's the notion of neighborhood that we should have or we should consider for our city, and how do we interpret it? The concept of neighborhood and its importance are nothing or never new, always embedded in the BIM Plus building level tools. Now, for example, on page 6 of the menu for new building, it states like this. The BIM is concerned about interactions between the assessed building, neighborhood properties, the neighborhood general. The assessment seeks to reduce negative impacts and reward efforts to improve the quality of the immediate surroundings. So the concept of good neighbor buildings, so to speak. So in an effort to do so, we believe in two fundamental principles. First of all, the concept of sustainability of a built environment is logically linked to neighborhood, which is a fundamental block of a city. And secondly, public rent matters. So we turn to some of the greatest champions and brightest minds of our time, like Jane Jacobs, Kevin Lynch, Colin Rowe, Spiral Kostoff. Now, we particularly like, the advice from Colin Rowe. So Rowe once said, in order for a city to thrive, we need a bricolage and metamorphosis approach to produce a functioning network of pocket utopias. Now, what does that mean? This means that we don't necessarily have any ambitious plan. And for us, we only know too well that our tool can never be perfect. We simply set ourselves a very modest task in multiple dimensions and multiple areas because we believe in the end, Hong Kong will be a collage city. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. So what is BIM Plus neighborhood? So this is it's basically a USRT designed for new or planned neighborhood, but also we also wouldn't like to preempt its use for existing neighborhoods as well. Now it does two things really. First of all, it evaluates the sustainability attribute of the planning, premeditated design, construction proposal of development project at the precinct, neighborhood or community scale. Now to us, the term precinct, neighborhood, community, they're all interchangeable. All right? And secondly, the evaluation is done against a full spectrum of 6 distinct social, environmental, and economic categories. So how do we do it? And how does BIM Plus neighborhood respond to our needs and respond to our urban context? We have a modest solution with 3 simple and yet fundamental principles. Now, first of all, to put emphasis on space between buildings. Now, first objective is to allow the planning, design of public land, infrastructure elements to take place at the beginning of a development process. Now, in order to help people understand more about placemaking, genius loci, and sense of place, we initiate a partnership project with the Hong Kong Public Space Initiative to carry out a series of urban experiments in Kwun Tong early this year. I believe it's August and September. And the findings were already shared in a seminar held last week. Now, the second principle is to embrace socio-economic elements as much as practical, all right? Such as community engagement, neighborhood amenities, sustainable lifestyle, diversity of housing types, community, existing economy, placemaking, local characters, conservation of cultural assets, and the CSR reporting. Our consultant Ira is going to tell you a bit more on this later on. Now, the third principle is to encourage each project to be a good neighbor. Now, in doing so, we encourage project proponents to look into the areas where the development project can bring about positive impacts on the surrounding area in terms of, for example, amenity, infrastructure provision, conservation effort, and the quality of the public realm design, etc. Now, thus, we also introduce an impact area into the assessment area for two. Now, as you can see from the comparison here between the NB, and the neighborhood scheme, in the NB, the assessment area is the same as the site area, but in NB, actually extend the impact, the assessment area, to include a 500 distance, away, from the site boundary. But being a good neighbor isn't just in a human sense, but also to our lands and nature at our doorstep. So in this particular tool, there are credits that we specifically set aside to deal with ecology. For example, under credit CSA5, there are two objectives, respectively, reduction in ecological impact and enhancement of ecological value. Now, put simply, the first one is really the minimization effort, whereas the second one, maximization. So why are they important? They're important for the simple reason that human race is just part of the wider ecosystem of this planet. And we simply cannot survive ourselves without keeping the ecosystem intact. Now, as a matter of fact, wildlife population around the world is diminishing at an alarming pace. Now, according to this latest Living Planet report, only published very recently, global wildlife population have fallen by 58%, since 1970. Now, if we take zero action, it could fall by as much as 67%, by the end of this decade. Now, admittedly, this is very much a West European study. No doubt, we also need effort to recreate our lost forest as suitable sanctuary habitats for our animals, insects, and birds. Now, surprisingly, Hong Kong seems to be quite resilient in this particular aspect, and according to this recent BBC study. Just look at these lovely animals that we can still find in our suburban area or countryside. I guess we all need to treasure all these cute little animals or neighbors of ours. Now, if we agree with the Bergman Commission in a definition of sustainability, which is to meet the present needs without compromising the needs of a future generation. To promote understanding in biodiversity and ecology, we also partner with the Hong Kong University to deliver a topical seminar on the subject, which was held in Hong Kong U campus only 2 weeks ago. Now, what are the guiding principles as we develop this tool? We got a feel. First of all, it has to have a systematic framework with quantifiable criteria. Now, it goes without saying that these criteria ought to be compatible with the other tools within the Beam Plus family. And secondly, the tool, it has to be a tool that can be applied to the unique context of our city. Now, ours, as you know, is very much a vertical city. But then it's not New York, it's not Chicago, it's not even Singapore, it is Hong Kong, right? We got to have an integrated approach. That means we have to understand the interrelationship between different requirements and different stages of the development process and how planning, design, implementation can dovetail together. It has to be user-friendly. That means the language, the requirements and thought processes have to be very clear, easily understood by all. The benchmarking has to be practical. It should be easy to use. As such, we try very hard to cross-reference our credit requirement to existing legislations, regulations, guidelines, codes of practice as much as possible. Now, finally, we don't want to create another piece of red tape for the industry to unlock. We don't want to have this voluntary tool to impede the development process. It's a voluntary scheme. It shouldn't have any linkage with the statutory process and the framework whatsoever. In the course of the development, we also examine and case study some of the more popular sophisticated rating tools, such as the CASB, the urban development in Japan, the LEED neighborhood from the US, the BREEAM community in the UK, the Green Star community developed by Australia, and also the Green Mark district in Singapore. Now, this neighborhood tool is also the first BIM Plus 2 that has been pilot tested. And it took a long while to complete that pilot testing process. The idea is to take stock of the lessons that we learned so that we can improve and recalibrate the tool before we roll it out. Now, there are 3 projects which participate in the piloting process. As you can see on the slide here, the first one is a housing authority subsidized sales flat development in Sam Shui Po, and the second one, transformation of the EMSD headquarters into a green building, and also the West Kowloon in the cultural district. Now, needless to say, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our helpers, collaborators. We are greatly indebted, to our steering committee members and many individuals, for the support, especially government departments like the AFCD, DSD, and Planning Department, and also the Hong Kong University and the Chinese University. Last but not the least, the untiring effort of our secretariat team, at the Hong Kong GBC, without which we would not have, gone this far. Going back, to this question, in the beginning of my presentation, why neighborhood matters. I would like to end my presentation with this quote, lovely quote, meaningful quote, from Joseph Rivet, arguably one of the most, or the greatest, writers and critiques in the architectural and planning world of our time. Now, he has this to say: I'm all for greening tall buildings, but I'm also very keen to note that greening a building doesn't cope with the problem of the tall building in the texture of the city. Extremes of inequality are underlying in the way those kind of cities are built. Thank you so much for your valuable time.